This week on Vaticano, we explore the life and legacy of Saint Benedict, from his early journey to the writing of his rule, which reshaped monastic life. We recall the destruction of Montecassino, one of the darkest chapters in Benedictine history, and the order's rebirth from its ruins. We meet the abbot primate of the Benedictine Confederation to see how the order endures 1,500 years on. And we discover a small church in the heart of Rome tied to the saint's early life, before his journey began, that transformed Western monasticism. For this and more, Vaticano starts now. In the quiet heart of Italy, where ancient villages and rolling hills preserve centuries of history, the memory of one of Christianity's most influential figures still lives on. From Norcia to Subiaco and Montecassino, the paths walked by Saint Benedict lead us beyond history. They invite us to discover the life and wisdom of a remarkable saint who transformed monasticism and European culture. At the College of Sant'Anselmo in Rome, headquarters of the Benedictine Confederation, much of Saint Benedict's legacy continues to shape the lives of monks from around the world.
We're here at Sant'Anselmo, which is sort of the global home of the Benedictine Confederation. Sant'Anselmo really has sort of three entities which make it up. The school, the university, Pontifical University of Sant'Anselmo, the College of Students, which live here, and then the Curia of the Benedictine Confederation, where I work and serve under the abbot primate.
Father Patrick Carter, a Benedictine monk from Clear Creek Abbey in Oklahoma, has served as secretary to the abbot primate of the Benedictine Confederation at Sant'Anselmo for the past 8 years. Here, at one of the largest Benedictine communities in the world, he lives alongside nearly 100 monks who study, pray, and work together in the heart of Rome.
Altogether, we are probably somewhere between 16,000 and 18,000 Benedictines in the world.
They all chose the Benedictine way of life, drawn by a tradition of work, prayer, and community, following the example of Saint Benedict, who was born in Norcia in the 5th century. Sent by his wealthy family to Rome to continue his studies, Benedict soon became disillusioned with the city and the lifestyle of many young students at the time. After just 2 years, he left behind his studies to search for God in solitude. He withdrew to Subiaco, where he lived as a hermit in a cave now known as the Sacro Specchio. Here he deepened his spiritual life, attracted his first followers, and eventually began to establish small monastic communities.
There's something about Subiaco that really attracts one to the place and to the spiritual experience. It's set in a tight little valley, a monastery built around this little cave where Benedict somehow managed to survive for years and years. It somehow draws one into this historical person and the reality of Saint Benedict, and gives us some ability to contact him.
Benedict continued his journey to Montecassino, where around the year 529 AD, he founded the monastery that would become one of the most important centers of Western monasticism, the Abbey of Montecassino. Here, within its walls, he wrote his famous rule, built around the principle Ora et labora, pray and work. Written more than 15 centuries ago, the rule went on to shape the history of Europe and continues to inspire people today, perhaps now more than ever.
The rule of Saint Benedict is a rule written for cenobites. That means monks who live in community. And I think that in our world today, we find ourselves more and more isolated by technology in many ways, that the advantages of communication actually take us physically apart. St. Benedict foresees a life in which monks are going to be sleeping in the same room, eating at the same table, praying together in the church, a life with real human and physical presence with one another. And I think that in society today, we really need to find opportunities to spend time in presence, in physical presence of other people.
Father of Western monasticism, patron saint of Europe, powerful protector against evil, Saint Benedict is not only remembered through history, but remains a living presence, inspiring generations who continue to seek God through the paths he first traced more than 1,500 years ago.
Saint Benedict represents in some way the rebirth of culture at the end of the Roman Empire, where Christianity is increasing, but the central and stabilizing force of the Roman government was falling into ruin. He is able to take some of the best aspects of the Roman culture, which was then falling away, and to put those into a Christian and monastic setting, which then allows the church to preserve some of that Roman wisdom of government and order in the future Christian society, which is going to be born in the Middle Ages, and which the monasteries played a central role in.
In a few moments, we'll be back to revisit the destruction of Montecassino, one of the darkest chapters in Benedictine history. Rising above the Liri Valley, the majestic Abbey of Montecassino, founded in 529 AD by Saint Benedict, has endured a remarkable journey of destruction and renewal. It was here that the saint discovered the remains of a pagan temple on the mountaintop and transformed the site into a place of Christian worship. It was also here that Saint Benedict wrote his famous rule, a guide for monastic life that would go far beyond Montecassino and leave an indelible mark on Europe and Christianity.
Soprattutto in epoca carolingia, grazie all'opera di...
Especially during the Carolingian period, thanks to the work of Charlemagne and Saint Benedict of Avignon, the rule of Benedict was promoted and gradually became the single rule of Western monasticism. From that moment on, Benedictine monasticism, born here at Montecassino, took on a much greater importance, becoming a unifying force for monastic life throughout Charlemagne's empire and the centuries that followed.
Dell'impero di Carlo Magno e delle epoche successive.
Throughout the centuries, the abbey suffered several destructions, such as by the Lombards in 570, by the Saracens in 883, and by an earthquake in 1349. The most notable destruction, however, happened on February the 15th, 1944, when the monastery was bombed during the Battle of Montecassino during the Second World War.
La zona in cui vivevano i monaci, la zona più antica della cosiddetta cella di San Benedetto, fu salvata dalla distruzione.
The oldest area, known as St. Benedict's Cell, was spared from destruction, and those who had taken refuge there survived. Other areas, however, were destroyed, causing a great loss of life. Because of the symbolic importance of the abbey, the bombing had an enormous emotional impact, because of what the abbey represented for Europe and beyond.
L'Abbazia rappresentava nell'Europa e anche al di là dell'Europa.
The Battle of Montecassino was one of the longest and bloodiest battles of World War II, and has been described as the largest aerial bombardment ever against a single building. It took place between January and May of 1944, as Allied forces tried to break through the German defensive line known as the Gustav Line, which blocked the road to Rome. Believing the Abbey, the most strategic position along the defensive line, had become a German stronghold, Allied bombers dropped 250 tons of explosives, reducing the historic monastery to rubble.
This was a crucial point along the Gustav Line. The defense of Rome was established here because this was the narrowest point of the Italian peninsula, and if they had chosen another position to hold, they would have had to deploy far greater resources.
Hundreds of civilians who had found refuge within the abbey's walls were killed, it remained one of the most controversial and arguably senseless acts of World War II. But the assumption was wrong. German troops were not occupying the Abbey.
Montecassino era un monumento culturale.
Because Montecassino was considered an untouchable cultural monument, the Germans also relied on the fact that it would not be attacked. Bombing the monastery was likely a strategic mistake, as the Germans later used the ruins as a defensive position.
Perché poi I tedeschi si asserragliarono nelle rovine.
The tide turned when Polish forces joined the battle. The Polish II Corps, led by General Władysław Anders, acting on orders from the commander of the U.S. Fifth Army, General Mark W. Clark, launched the final assault on the German defensive positions.
Il generale Mark Clark era il comandante della Quinta Armata.
General Mark Clark was the commander of the Fifth Army, and clearly it was he who directed the operations here. But it must also be remembered that by the time the Polish forces arrived, this area had already been the scene of many months of fighting and troop movements. It is also true that it was very much a team effort. The Poles were certainly able to prevail, but only after those who came before them had paid an extraordinarily high price.
Ad avere la meglio dopo che I loro predecessori hanno pagato un prezzo altissimo.
Victory finally came on May the 18th, 1944. To commemorate and pay tribute to those who died fighting for the freedom of Europe, thousands of people gather every year on May the 18th on the battlefield near the monastery, founded by one of her patron saints. Among them is Major Władysław Dąbrowski, one of the last surviving veterans of the battle, who continues to take part in the commemorations every year. He's 102 years old.
I'm still deeply moved, especially when I see these graves where my comrades lie, commanders too. The first platoon commander was killed here, on this very spot. This area over here was the battlefield. Our units advanced through it. General Anders changed the direction of the attack altogether. We didn't go through those mountains. Instead, we crossed this field, and directly in front of us we had the monastery.
82 years after its destruction, the rebuilt abbey continues to carry forward the legacy of Saint Benedict. Time and again, the monastery has risen from the ruins, reflecting the enduring faith that inspired its founder, Saint Benedict.
Da queste distruzioni il monachesimo qui a Montecassino è sempre...
After each destruction, monastic life at Montecassino has always been reborn. This is why the Abbey's motto is, Succisa Viscerit, a root that has been cut returns to bloom. Today, Montecassino is home to a small community of 8 monks. We try to live according to the Benedictine rule, balancing work, prayer, and study. There's also an important work of preservation and safeguarding, caring for the cultural heritage we have received. There is also an important work of preservation and safeguarding, caring for the cultural heritage we have received, much of which survived the bombing, and which has continued to grow over time through the monastery's archive and library.
L'archivio che è la biblioteca del monastero.
Amid the decline of religious life and the challenges of modern society and the digital age, the Benedictine Order has stood firm for nearly 1,500 years. Though suppressed time and again, the timeless Benedictine spirituality and legacy continue to resonate with the faithful across generations. As Abbot Primate of the Benedictine Confederation, Abbot Jeremias Schroeder serves as the unifying head of the world's thousands of Benedictine monks and nuns. EWTN Vatican journalist Rudolf Gehrig met him in Rome.
In September 2024, you were elected Abbot Primate of the Benedictine Confederation, making you, in a sense, the highest-ranking Benedictine monk. What is the role of the Abbot Primate?
Our Benedictine family is a very diversified and complicated organization, and I'm presiding over it all, trying to somehow keep our Benedictine family united. We are really a family of 19 congregations of monks and many more organizations, federations, congregations of women, 6,000 men, 12,000 Benedictine women. My role here is to keep it all together, to keep it united, and to strengthen the sense of family and belonging by maintaining this house here.
How would you say that Saint Benedict helped shape Western monasticism and the European civilization?
I will say he did this with the cross, the book and the plough. But that's not my own invention. That's how Pope Paul VI described the role of Saint Benedict and his disciples in shaping Europe, in shaping Western civilization. So evangelization, the cross, culture and learning, that's the book, education. And finally the plough, a very real hands-on approach to making lives better, to transforming the way we live.
What is the essence of Benedictine spirituality?
Our life is very much based on community. We do live in community of monks or of nuns and sisters. And it is nourished by the basics of Christian life. Scripture is very important to us. The celebration of the liturgy has a very important role in how we live, how we shape our days. And then it is a life that is very balanced, where all these various elements come together without exaggeration, but really in a harmonious unity that nourishes life and gives life.
The rule of Saint Benedict was revolutionary in its time, and it seems to have lost none of its relevance today. So how come the rule of Saint Benedict has survived for 1,500 years?
I think the great success of the rule is attributable to its innate qualities. It is just a very balanced rule. Really, if you compare it with similar texts that were written around the time of Benedict, this one has much more depth. And at the same time, it remains flexible. It allows for adaptation. It does not say it has to be done exactly like this. It gives fundamental principles. Today I would say that those principles still are valid. The balance of it all, the wisdom that shines through, and the fact that it has been adapted again and again over 1,500 years. The text has never been changed, obviously, but how we interpret it, how we understand it, has been able to develop and adapt to different times and different sensibilities.
Out of curiosity, do you have an example of an adaptation that you had to make during the last centuries?
We stopped corporal punishment. That's one. The prayer load that's described, that's not a good term, prayer load, but the amount of daily prayer that the community should have has varied enormously. And nowadays we pray generally slightly less than what the rule actually recommends to incorporate our work schedule as well. So there was real flexibility there. And Benedict already talks about that flexibility. He says, this is what I propose. If the abbot has good reasons for organizing it differently, he may do so.
If Saint Benedict could speak to the people of Europe and the world today, what message do you think he would want to convey?
I think a message of peace. I mean, this is especially looking at Europe, where we are coming out of a long time of peace after the Second World War, where the understanding of peace was even strongly shaped by some of these Benedictine ideas. And now we see how the peace that we have achieved over such a long period of time is not just fading away, but collapsing under aggression and a new belligerence. I think Benedict tries to give us the tools to really build peace and start from the bottom up, start from the roots, how we live together in small units, understand that we are diverse and yet bound together, and try to extrapolate that, translate that also on the level of how our nations live together.
We'll be back after a short break to discover a small church hidden in the heart of Rome, tied to St. Benedict's early life. Hidden in plain sight, in the heart of Rome's Trastevere district near Piazza Piscinula, stands a tiny church that holds a unique place in the history of the Benedictine family. It was here that the young Saint Benedict stayed for several years at the end of the 5th century, around the year 495. Those years in Rome would change not only the course of his life, but in many ways, the course of history itself.
Effettivamente San Benedetto è soggiornato qui in questo luogo.
Saint Benedict did indeed stay here, in this very place. This was where his family home stood, the Domus Anicia, the residence of Saint Benedict's family. They were from Norcia, but like many patrician families of the time, they also had a house here, in this part of Trastevere. We are talking about the 5th century, when Saint Benedict came to Rome to study, and it was precisely here that Benedict left everything behind and decided to become a hermit, withdrawing to a cave some distance away in Subiaco.
L'eremita a la grotta che ha trovato abbastanza lontano a Subiaco.
Veni Creator Spiritus, mentes tu.
The first place of worship was most likely built in 524, on the very bricks that can still be seen today, bricks believed to have been part of the house where Saint Benedict once lived. Today, the Chapel of Our Lady stands on the site of the original 7th century oratory. Even though the small chapel was destroyed time and again during barbarian invasions, the faithful never ceased rebuilding it.
Qui si trova anche la cella, chiamata la cella di San Benedetto.
Here we also find the room known as Saint Benedict's cell, where he is believed to have stayed. Here too is the Madonna of Mercy, an image that is also very ancient. It was in this place that Saint Benedict heard the voice of God. So we can truly say that this place is a cradle of European Christian civilization, and we can say that it was born here, through this great founder of Western monasticism, Saint Benedict.
Del monachesimo occidentale San Benedetto.
Within the silence of these walls, God granted Saint Benedict the first graces that would eventually give rise to the Benedictine Order. On the left-hand side, the ancient bricks are still visible, that archaeologists have dated between the 4th and 5th centuries.
In the Middle Ages, this church was built with 3 naves. We can also see that all the columns are different, made from reused ancient materials. And the same is true of the capitals, which archaeologists date to a period between the 1st and 5th centuries.
Since 2012, the church has been entrusted to the Heralds of the Gospel, a Catholic international private association of Christ's faithful of pontifical right, approved by Pope St. John Paul II.
Saint Benedict is also a saint for us heralds of the Gospel. Our spirituality is very much connected to Saint Benedict because he was a man, a contemplative man. A man whose motto was ora et labora, that is, the contemplative life, but alongside work, earning one's living, and taking work as a way of also honoring God and doing good.
Come una maniera di anche onorare a Dio e fare bene.
The small church in Trastevere is also famous for its bell tower, the smallest and oldest in Rome. But not only that, the church also preserves 3 very important paintings dedicated to the patriarch Saint Benedict.
Quello che sta nell'altare maggiore
What stands on the main altar behind me is Saint Benedict. The painting is from the medieval period and depicts Saint Benedict on his abbatial chair with his crosier. He is dressed entirely in the black habit, which is the proper habit of the Benedictines, and he holds in his hand the rule of Saint Benedict, the rule of the monks, where the opening words are written, which say, "Listen, O son, to the teachings of the Master, and incline your ear to hear and listen to God in your heart."
a Dio nel tuo cuore, no?
To this day, the church and the story of Saint Benedict continue to fascinate all who walk the evocative streets of Trastevere.